radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. That's right. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Been waiting for this show for a long time. We, tonight, are going to talk about Shapeshifters. And we do it enough, but not enough, right? And it's always, it's rare when we have on like a shapeshifter historian and specialist and researcher. And so tonight we get to just focus on that. We talk about shapeshifters all the time and they come up in conversations, but tonight John Kachuba is with us and that is the show. We've got an amazing week here on Fade to Black. Tonight, John's with us. Tomorrow night, Dr. Simeon Hine is back with us. We're going to be talking science tomorrow night, the multiverse, physics. Yeah, an all science night. You're going to see me smiling a lot on tomorrow's show. It's going to be great. And then Thursday night, John Greenwald Jr., the Black Vault. Black Vault Thursday night. It is the Fade to Black Vault. I said it. I said it. There, I said it. I said it out loud. You guys were thinking it. I know that you were. I want to share something with you really quick before I bring John on. Today was after all of the rain, power outages, and everything else that has been going on here in Southern California. Well, you know, the rest of the country too as well. But today it hit like 72, 73 degrees. The sun was out. And I had a bunch of work to do this morning, and then I had the news and stuff to do this afternoon. But I walked outside. The gardener was here, and that smell of, you know, fresh cut grass and everything. And I was out in the sun. I was like, man, I'm going for a ride. So I jumped on my bike and took off. And I buzz around the desert. I'm gone for like 45 minutes. And as I swing back, I'm coming from the opposite side, the far side of Skunk Works. And there's a street right there, Avenue M, I think it is, Avenue N, Avenue M. Anyway, I'm going down there, which goes by the side of Northrop Grumman and Skunk Works. But that's not the story. The story is this. So as I'm going, I'm always looking to my left because the runway is right there. And you can see all of the buildings and stuff. And I just want to catch something. And so today I saw one of the most incredible things ever. Check this. So I see something coming up the runway this way. Just kind of catch, but I got to stay on the road. You know, I'm doing 70 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. And I look, and then it takes off. It's a U2. It's a black U2, and it's taking off this way. And what really caught my eye as I'm watching it, you know, I'm looking at it and watching the road, looking at it, is this thing doesn't take off like a jet. It just goes, it's in the air. It just, that thing floats. Anyway, so it takes off. I was like, man, how cool is this, right? And I'm just watching the U2 take off, and it immediately turns. It turns to its right and flies away from me, turns around, and now I'm going in the same direction. I'm just watching it. It goes out over the mountains, and before I get to the next stoplight, which is probably a mile or so, it takes a U-turn. The U2 took a U-turn, takes a turn, comes back, and lands And I thought, wow. And then as I'm looking, it takes off again. I'm watching a U2 do touch and goes, testing on a loop. And I got to tell you, it was majestic. It was pretty cool. That was a once, and I've never, as much as I've been out here, I've never seen anything like that. And so there it was. I probably just disclosed something. So as I'm driving home, I'm ready to bring John on now. Now that I shared that with you, it's just incredible. And so, and this thought popped in my head. This is my twisted mind as I'm thinking about that. I thought to myself, how many U2s are flying today? The answer to that is not many. It's not many. It's got to be a handful, right? And then I thought, how many pilots are there? How do you get a flight certification for a U2? Not a Cessna 150, right? How many flight certified U2 pilots are there in the world? That's got to be one of the most exclusive jobs. And I just thought about that. I mean, what? A dozen? Think about that. Yeah. Anyway, so that was my day. And it was just absolutely incredible to see. But think about that. Somebody post that up in the chat. How many U2s are flying today? How many U2 certified pilots are there out there? It's got to be out there. That number's got to be there. Somebody pop it up there in Twitter. In the chat. All right. Tonight, John Kachuba is with us. We're going to be talking about shapeshifters. We're going to go back into history and discuss what's going on with shapeshifters and cultures around the world. And we're going to go all the way through to today and modern times. He's an award-winning author of 13 books, lots of articles, short stories, and poems. He holds an advanced degree in creative writing and teaches that subject through Ohio University and the Gotham Writers Workshop. Ohio University, OU or OSU. Wow, that's pretty cool. He's a member of the Historical Novel Society and the Horror Writers Association. Yes, he speaks on the paranormal, the metaphysical, and is a regular speaker at universities, libraries, paranormal conferences, and podcasts, radio, and TV, just like Fade to Black. Now, my opening question to John tonight is, what the heck is Love, Lust, the Paranormal? Yeah, I think that was a movie on Cinemax back in the 90s. And we'll find out, because right now I want to welcome to Fade to Black, John Kachuba. There he is.
Thank you, Jimmy. I hate that question, man. No, I'll tell you what, that's doing some deep research. I give you a lot of credit for that. The short answer is that was a TV program that was put on by the Sundance channel. And it was about the paranormal. Why they ever decided to call it Love, Lust, the Paranormal is totally beyond me.
What did it like star David Duchovny?
Well, I mean, it should have, because
right.
It was crazy. I was talking a little bit about spiritualism, the Fox sisters in New York, that had the haunted cottage that began this whole thing about spiritualism and all that. And so I was on the program talking about that. And the clip is still floating around somewhere on the internet if you want to see it. But if you're looking for love and lust, you're not going to find it in there, unfortunately.
No, it's not the
weirdest title.
Yeah, it's not the skinny or younger you. That's one of those shows you kind of say something like, well, I was in college. I was experimenting, Before we get started, John, you get the first time guest disclaimer. And I can't believe this is the first time you've been on the show, but the next time you're on the show, you don't get it, but tonight you do. And the disclaimer is this: John, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. But you have to accept.
I accept your disclaimer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so
Or
much.
is an electronic signature somewhere necessary?
Right.
I'll do it if you want.
Right. You know, when I get just like any, terms, right? You've got to click. When I get the email, we've updated our terms of service, right? And click here to see the chat. I'm like, delete. I'm not going to go and read it. I don't care. And there's nothing I can do about it. Right. But I guess the law says they are bound to notify us so they can say, well, we sent you an email that said we modified our terms of service. So, yeah, nobody reads that stuff. And you just have to accept and move on. At least mine is straightforward. Right. And there's no hidden language.
It was pretty short, pretty concise.
Yes. Now let's love, lust, and the paranormal. We're going to circle back to that. Okay, I'm not gonna let that go. But shapeshifters, I look at it this way. I feel that people use the term, the word, the noun, a little bit too freely, and not necessarily because I back up and go, I don't think you know the meaning of that word. And it's done, innocently, and I understand, but there's shapeshifters can be different things to different people. And throughout history, it could also apply to different things. And we'll get to that in a second. But for you, when you write about shapeshifters or you think about shapeshifters, what is your definition?
Well, first, I have to agree with you in that people do use the term loosely. I give a lot of talks in public libraries, universities, conferences, and mostly about ghosts, because most of my books previous to Shapeshifters have been about ghosts. And a lot of times people will come up to me afterwards and they'll say something like, well, I had a shapeshifter. I saw a shapeshifter. And meanwhile, I just been talking for an hour about ghosts, and they'll describe it to me and I'll say, well, that's not really a shapeshifter. I say, what is it? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a shadow person or whatever you want to talk about, but it's not a shapeshifter. So for me, the definition really is very straightforward. I mean, the traditional shapeshifter is a person who is capable of transforming himself into another person, an animal, sometimes even an inanimate object, a broom. That sounds stupid, but Japanese culture has shapeshifters that transform themselves into brooms. So there you go. And have the ability to transform back. So that's kind of a very, very specific sort of narrow definition. That's where I start in my book, with that definition. But then I also look at a variety of other types of shapeshifters. And I sort of put that shapeshifters in quotes because they don't really fit into that specific definition, but they're close enough to I guess, exemplify for me what it means to be a shapeshifter. And we could talk about that a little bit as we get into it. But, for instance, I talk about what I call internal and external shapeshifters. Those are terms that I came up with. I haven't heard people say that, but for me, an external shapeshifter is the quintessential, werewolf or vampire. You see a person, next thing you know, you're looking at a snarling wolf. Okay, we can see that change. It's external. But then I also believe that there's internal shapeshifters where there isn't anything about their physical appearance that changes, but that there's an internal, I guess we'll say a psychological change or shift. And I think of people like Ted Bundy, for instance, a serial killer, right? Ted Bundy, to all practical aspects, when you saw him, was this clean cut, kind of college kind of looking guy. He helped little old ladies put their groceries in his car, whatever. But inside, I mean, he was this homicidal psychopath, right? So to me, that's a shapeshifter, that you can sort of be one type of person in society where people see you as such, this nice, helpful young man, clean cut, unlike us, clean shaven guy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But then, he'll kill you and eat you for breakfast. So Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, what is that? So I look at that kind of thing.
I've always. You're right. The Ted Bundy thing is like the scariest thing, because they're interviewing, his neighbor. He was such a nice boy. He helped me out with my garbage, and she's like, what? And he was the last, because you paint a picture in your head, and that ain't it. Right? That's not the picture. And then we have, the external. I like this internal, external way of looking at it, because in pop culture, something you hear a lot, and then we'll go into the history of this. Today, the queen is a shape-shifting reptilian. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. Is that, to you, using the term correctly in that context?
Yeah, I think it is. You're talking about, David Icke's.
Obama's bodyguards, whoever, right?
Yes,
shape-shifting reptilians,
right?
But
and I think that goes into the traditional definition, because that story, that theory, if you will, and I use theory very loosely here, is that, again, we see an exterior, we see the queen, we see Obama, but underneath that, and apparently able to show itself at times, is some type of reptilian alien. And if I'm sure you've seen on YouTube and everything else, the images, of a shapeshifter, supposed shapeshifter's eye. And it looks like the iris of a snake. And they'll say, see, well, Photoshop is great, but AI is great.
I can't remember who. Okay, just before I brain freeze here, there was a presenter. I believe she was Russian, and she could change the shape of her pupils on a blink.
Really?
Go full reptilian, and would do it all the time. And do it. I mean, she had muscle control, and could do. It was, man, I'm telling you, it was pretty incredible. I had a friend. I'm going to share this with you. I can put you in touch with them, by the way. Comedian, famous comedian, and we were. I think it was like New Year's. We're having a dinner party at the house, and I've got some people of note at the table, and I like to keep the conversation alive, right? And so we got the prime rib roast out, and we're cracking champagne, and we're doing our thing, right? Okay. So I said, okay, all right, everybody tell a story. Start here. Boom, boom, boom. And so we're like 4 stories in. Comes to the comedian. He's over here to my left, and he goes, I was at home with my girlfriend, and we're sitting on the couch watching a movie. And I turned and looked at her while eating popcorn, and she shape-shifted into a reptilian and turned and looked at me as I watched her transform, and she went back to normal. She knows that I saw her do it. Right? No. And I'm telling you, John, deadpan straight face. He was being very serious, and sharing this moment. We were all, I heard a pin drop, like, what? And then he expanded on it from there. And so that goes back to when he says it in that context, he's using it correctly. Mm-hmm. And he saw it. So my question is, if that is a shapeshift, was the shapeshift just for him? Could I have been sitting next to her on this side and not seen anything?
That's an interesting question, and I haven't thought about that. But I do know that,
is it physical, or is it some kind of mind meld, Jedi, mind trick?
Right. Well, so I'll switch to ghosts just for a second, because when I talk about ghosts, a lot of times the question always is, what is really a ghost? And I think one explanation for a ghost might be that it's actually mind projection, that we actually create the ghost. And what I mean by that is, let's say, you have Uncle Joe has been very, very close to you, right? Almost like a father to you. You've loved this guy dearly. And at some point, Uncle Joe passes away. And obviously, you go through the stages of grief. You're very upset. You're depressed about it. You're thinking about Uncle Joe all the time. He's on your mind. So a couple of weeks after he's been buried, you go to his apartment to start cleaning stuff out. You open the door, and there's Uncle Joe sitting in his favorite chair, smoking his favorite pipe. He kind of looks at you, smiles, and then disappears. Now, what was that? So I need to back up and say that I hear these kinds of experiences all the time when I'm giving talks about ghosts. People come up to me and they'll say, and it's always a loved one, and they'll say, he came into my house last night and just walked through the kitchen. All right. They saw that. And I even put saw in quotes. They believe they saw something happen, that they saw this person again. But I don't think that anybody else would have. I think if you were in that room or I were in that room and we didn't know Uncle Joe from a hole in the wall, that person would have said, look over there. And we would have said, what? I mean, I've been on a million investigations, paranormal investigations, where somebody says, look, over the corner, right there. And we all look and we don't see anything, but this person does. So I think there's a possibility that we project that ourselves, that we create that image. And I'm not even saying that it's a hallucination. I'm saying that we somehow actually create an image that is real for us at that moment. And I am differentiating that from hallucination. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. Maybe a psychologist would say, no, that is exactly a hallucination. But I think it's something different. I think it's a little more subtle. And I think in some ways, we even call that thing into being, that through our own mind. And I think of some monks in Tibet, for instance, that talk about the ability of being able to meditate on a particular object in their mind. They'll just, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, the same object. And then at some point, that object becomes reality. They call it a tulpa. And they say they've created that. They've created something out of nothing other than mental energy.
Manifesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, that could be, I think that same situation might be applicable to what you just talked about with your comedian friend and his girlfriend. Maybe only he was seeing that, and maybe she was allowing that. And maybe he was hallucinating too. I mean, we don't know.
He said, you know what he said? He said she knew that she got caught. He looked away, went back to normal, and continued watching the movie and act like it didn't happen. Yeah. And he was him telling the story was freaking him out.
Yeah.
And this is somebody of note. This isn't just, this is, if you know what I mean, it was pretty amazing to hear that. And, and even more amazing that I just give up somebody's private situation live on the air. But now, so when we talk about these modern contexts, are they similar throughout history? Has the methodology, changed, or has it stayed pretty consistent as to what a shapeshifter does and what is expected?
I think the definition, I think the expectations of shapeshifters have certainly changed. In my book, the subtitle Shapeshifters is a history. And as you mentioned earlier, it is in fact a history. So I go back to prehistoric times, where the first image that we know of a shapeshifter appears on a cave painting in France. Mm-hmm. And what it shows, I have a picture of it in the book. It's what archaeologists and anthropologists believe it's depicting is a shaman in sort of doing hunter magic, as they call it, hunter ritual magic. And so he's standing on his hind legs, and he's got his arms up, but his legs, his hands and his feet have toes and fingers like we'd expect. But the head is the head of a deer with antlers, and the body is a furry deer-like body. The eyes of the animal are a little bit different because instead of being on the side of the head like a deer is, they're dead forward like ours. Deer don't look like that, So they're saying that this is showing a transformation of a human being into a deer. So early on, this whole power of shapeshifting was given to people who were spiritual. They were the shamans, they were the wizards, or whatever. Even before, and then when you get into more classical antiquity, like Greek and Roman culture, the shapeshifters are all gods and goddesses. Mortal people don't shapeshift. You look at those ancient legends, and mortal people bear the brunt of some of the shapeshifters' anger, but because they're gods, the mortal people don't shift. By the time you get to like the Middle Ages, we're now thinking shapeshifters are witches and wizards and warlocks, but still not the common people. But after a while, with the Industrial Revolution, and even before that, with the invention of the press, the printing press, and literature, and more widespread literacy, now we start seeing that it's not necessarily only the gods or people of spiritual nature that shapeshift, but other people can do it too. So throughout history, it kind of changes who shapeshifters are or who they can be, and therefore what powers they have as well. So it's interesting. And from culture to culture, it really varies. I looked, I guess, primarily in Europe, because that's sort of, Western culture is kind of our culture here. But I also looked in Asia, in Japan and Southeast Asia, and some shapeshifter stories there. South America, and depending again on the culture, what a shapeshifter does, who a shapeshifter can be, what their powers are, all those really, really change from culture to culture. It's fascinating. The bottom line for me, Jimmy, was that, when I got into this, I'm thinking, werewolves, vampires, I got it. I pretty much know it all.
Right.
Then I find out that there's like 8 million types of shapeshifters in Japan.
Yeah.
The rest of the world.
Right. Let's go back to the cave paintings for a second, because even if you look, you're right about Central and South America, and certainly Egypt, and later, a couple of thousand years later, you have Greece and Rome and their gods and demigods and how they were portrayed. But that all came much later. When you talk about cave paintings, 20,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, 30, 40,000 years ago, in some cases may predate language. Right now, if you stop and examine that for a second, if it, certainly predates writing, but if it's predating language, what is presented on a cave wall is not an accident. It took a lot of work to come up with pigment and everything else for prehistoric cultures to do that. So when you paint something, it's either something that you saw or something that was communicated to you. And if it was predating language, then it's more on the something they saw side, right? Where it's being documented. And so do you wonder about that they actually saw? I know it sounds crazy, right? A deer with human feet, but
Right.
Human eyes on a deer head, and it's one of the most incredible pieces of art like ever in the history of man. And I love it. But when you see that, it makes you question, maybe this is coming from reality.
Right. So there's a couple of things. you can question what reality is. We can go, we can make this very philosophical, man. But the idea of reality here. So they may have experienced that type of being, but a possible way they experienced it could have been through psychedelics. So what's going on here? Anthropologists are speculating that image was representing a ritual, a magical ritual being performed by a shaman. And based on some archaeological evidence and all, they feel that it's possible that these early people were ingesting natural hallucinogenics from the environment, mushrooms, whatever. And if they're out there and the object is to have some kind of a meeting to talk about how they're going to get deer, how they're going to go hunt deer, and the shaman comes in and says, okay, here's what we're going to do. And they start chanting, they start doing these hallucinogenic, substances. They may actually be seeing the transformation, and that may be their reality.
Right.
Is it actually physically happening? I mean, if you and I walked in, if we were able to time travel and we walked into that cave, would we see that? Or would we say, well, what are these guys doing? And do they have any mushrooms left? I mean, so
yeah, right. Or bad deer meat.
Bad deer meat. Right.
Yeah.
But apparently this would work, because what the speculation is that these hunters would then get themselves in such a state that they believed that they had transformed to deer. So if you believe, or whatever the animal was, in this particular case, we think it was deer. So if you believe that, then you can go right out to the herd, and you can actually sort of work yourself into the herd, because you are part of that herd. And then how easy does it become to take the prey? And I'm not saying being a caveman was easy, but certainly that gives you some access. I mean, even Native Americans, when they started hunting buffalo and things, a lot of times they wear a buffalo robe, or to kind of work closer to the herd, and not just Native Americans, cultures all around the world do this. I think of the berserkers. There's a great example from Scandinavian countries, around maybe 1100, something like that. These guys, for your audience, if they don't know who they were warriors that were basically crazy people. I mean, they did take hallucinogenics, and they would work themselves up into such a frenzy, such a ferocious frenzy, that once in battle, they would cut down anything in their path.
Well, they scared the crap out of anybody that was facing them too. Yeah.
And there were various clans. There was Bear Clan, Wolf Clan. So they would wear the hides, the pelts, the heads of these animals, and go running into battle, roaring, screaming, totally out of their minds, just swinging at everything. And it got to the point where if you were another warrior and you weren't a berserker, you stayed way behind them. You let them, they were shock troops.
Right.
They were in front, and then you followed behind. And it got to the point they were so bad that they were out of control, that the various kings of these different, countries at that time actually outlawed the berserkers because they couldn't even control them. But here's an example again, where they were taking these hallucinogenics and believing with every ounce of their being, and they had a lot of being, with every ounce, that they had converted to wolves and bears and killer animals. And that's how they acted out. And they said that this frenzy would last sometimes 24 hours. And then when it finally wore away, they were useless. These guys were just dead on the ground for days at a time. They were totally wiped out. And from this,
same thing after a Van Halen show in 1983. but yeah.
Berserkers there,
yeah, for sure. At what point in history did things start to take a darker turn, where cultures were talking about humans shape-shifting into something that had bad intentions, whether it was a werewolf or a human with fangs and what a witch, whatever it may have, a devil, a demon, right?
Right.
At what point did that start to solidify?
I think I would. I would say probably around the time that Christianity starts to get stronger and starts to become more of a widespread religion, a phenomena.
So you're saying Charlemagne-ish,
Could
300
be.
AD, 300 AD, or before?
Well, I think once you get the concept of the devil, in there, which is Christianity, right? The angels and devils, God and the devil. I mean, that's the whole thing. Once that concept takes hold, and it does, once Christianity spreads throughout Europe. And by the way, I'm going to stop right here for a second to say that talking about Europe, this happens at different times at different places. And in Europe, I think it's the advent of Christianity, where the devil becomes this very important figure, that he's everywhere, just like God is everywhere. The devil's everywhere. And he's going to get you if you don't watch out. And so shapeshifters now, where they could have in the past, in the ancient times, Greek, Roman, sometimes even be benevolent, now they're not. Now they're evil, because that can only come from the devil. And so they're, so God's on one side and you got devils on the other side with all their minions, which would include shapeshifters and who knows whatever else, right? Demons and whatever. So I think in Middle Ages in Europe, it starts to happen. And then by the time you get to the time of the witchcraft trials and everything in the 17th century, 18th century, well, that's what, early 18th, but like 16th, 17th century, I think witches are firmly affiliated with shapeshifting. And so they are evil. But that's Europe. You look again, like in Japan, and it seems that shapeshifters, well, they're different, because a lot of the shapeshifters in Japan are actually shapeshifting ghosts, which is something that's a different wrinkle than we have here or in Western culture. Shapeshifters in Western culture are humans that have this power. But in Japan, so many of them they're dead, they're ghosts. But they shapeshift as ghosts into living people. And almost 90% of the time, it's for revenge on somebody. It's frequently a woman whose husband, killed her or something else. And so she goes back to kill him. So shapeshifters, I think, in that culture have always had kind of that evil connotation. Not necessarily affiliated with a devil or a demon, but just
right. So it's shape-shifting. The spirit comes back into the real world and shape-shifts into a body, into the physical.
In Japan, we're talking.
Yeah.
Well,
but that's terrifying.
Yeah, right. So it is. I mean, when you read some of these shape-shifting stories, you go, "That's incredible," and so many of them are so typical. It's usually a jilted lover or a suicidal woman or something, and often female, and they come back as their ex-husband's new wife or girlfriend, and will spend a couple of days with the husband, and when they're done, kill him, and then go back to the ghost world in their ghostly form again. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, sounds like somebody I dated once. The thing about is it's the unknown. When we say supernatural, right, or paranormal, something that's outside of normal, but you don't know the difference.
Right.
That's the scary part, right? Where you're getting taken, and to think that a spirit can take the form of a human for revenge, and you don't know the better. That's terrifying. That's terrifying.
Well, yeah.
That's terrifying.
And that is such a main theme in Japanese, folk tales and folklore. It's just like,
now, why do they do that, John? Do they do that to teach a lesson? And why? And probably more important than that question is, why do the Japanese have the scary market cornered? They can scare you. They really know how to mess with the head, don't they?
Yeah, the ring and so many other things. Yeah. I don't know. I think though, Jimmy, I think part of it is what you're saying is that everything sort of appears normal. I mean, the Ring, if you think of that character, I forgot what her name was, but I mean, she's a woman, but a creepy woman because you never see her face, got her hair down all the time, which, by the way, is also another type of Japanese ghost that you never see the face. I mean, these movies that the Japanese come up with, a lot of their horror movies, those figures are right out of their folklore. You know, we think like they invented them. Well, not really. Some of these are ancient, hundreds of years old, you know, but they bring them into the real world today. I don't know. I think it's because I think they're so scary because they do seem like normal. Just like we were talking before about serial killers. The guy looks
check
normal.
this out, John. Check this out. Then the new girlfriend goes to jail. I very rarely post a comment from the chat, but that was world class right there. That was pretty good. That was pretty good. Continue. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was pretty fun.
I just think it's because their depiction is so lifelike and so human that we mistrust that we trust it. We trust it as being like us, like human, and then we get the rug pulled down from under us when we find out that, oh man, this is not what I thought it was, and that's the scary part. What any movie, whether it's Japanese or not, any movie, any book, the scary part is always what you don't know, right? Once you've seen the monster, you've seen it, but until you've seen it, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it can do, and that's the terrifying part. You know, once you see a werewolf, I mean, yeah, it's scary, but you know, okay, yeah, it's a big wolf. He's going to kill me. I know. But if you don't know what
it's the same thing. Same thing with zombies. Right. It's just like they're very slow. I think there's not a whole lot to be scared of. And do you remember? Okay, talk about shape shifting. Let's go back to the 30s and black and white movies, right? And when you look at something like The Mummy, and the slowest dragging one leg, but managed to take everybody out. But the shape-shifting Dracula, Duke could climb up walls, turn into a bat. He could fly. Slept all day, stayed up all night. When you're tired, everything that is terrifying was in Dracula and what a vampire is. Right.
I like Nosferatu, the old silent.
Still
film.
The scariest, still the best one.
It is, and it's just it's a very creepy looking guy, but just That's anyway.
Well, okay. So obviously, we're going to spend some time on vampires tonight, and we'll do that after the break. The indigenous cultures here in the United States and North America, Central America too, but shape-shifting is the culture, isn't it?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, there's actually shapeshifters like in the Southwest here in America, skinwalkers among the Dene people and the Utes and some others, and they're actual shaman that can shapeshift. Up in the northern part of America, northern Midwest, you have the Wendigo, and up into Canada, same thing. That's a shapeshifter. But I think where a lot of that stems from, I think in a lot of indigenous cultures, whether it's in North America or wherever, is that again, a lot of it originates in ceremony, in ritual, not unlike when we were talking about the prehistoric times, whether they're hunter rituals or healing rituals or whatever. There's frequently a transformation of some person who is normally a spiritual person, who has that ability to transform into something else, to do something like healing or whatever, hunting or something. In the skinwalker's case, though, they talk about the shaman transforming simply to kill. I mean, that's the skinwalker's job. It's usually revenge. That's what a skinwalker is supposed to do. So that's a shaman that even in his day job, you don't want to meet him probably,
The depictions, both in the oral tradition and in drawings of skinwalkers and other shape-shifting animals in indigenous culture. Some of the most frightening, and this goes into Central America too as well. The Mexican culture and then even going further back into the Aztecs. Some of the most frightening imagery ever. And is it a way of being a good parent and a good leader to scare people straight, right? To keep your kids out of the woods, right? I get that. Is that the purpose behind it? Is it for morality in a twisted way? But there has to be a purpose for it, right? In the oral tradition.
No, you're exactly right. I think not just shape shifting, but even if you go look at some of the ancient original fairy tales that like the Grimm's brothers eventually sort of modernized and put together in a book, you look at a lot of those fairy tales and these kinds of things, and they are designed to teach. They are designed to teach kids, stay away from the river because there's things there that can grab you and pull you down and drown you. Well, they don't want the kid to fall in the river and drown. So they do serve a purpose like that, and they do serve a sense of creating what is right behavior versus wrong behavior. This is not the way you do things. If you do it like this, the boogeyman's going to come and get you. I mean, I never said it to my kids, but I know a lot of parents say, the boogeyman will get you. What is the boogeyman? We don't even know what that is, but it's going to get you. So, okay, I won't do it, Mom. Be good, because if you're not good, Santa Claus won't give you. I mean, all these things, and including shapeshifters as just part of the whole pantheon of folk characters. They have a sense, they have a purpose. It's to exactly right to give some structure to a society, establish some norms for a society, establish personal behavior, individual behavior, what's right, what's wrong, how you interact with other people, where you go, where you shouldn't go. So, yeah.
Well, okay, and then we have to ask ourselves how much of this is a moral tale and how much of it is reality. There's probably some cases throughout history of real shape-shifting things going on.
Right.
And that's the other part. Where do we separate reality from, like I said, a moral compass set of words for guidance?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there have been examples. I mean, I think probably the first recorded examples date back to probably the early 17th century, like in Germany, of people that were sure they had turned into werewolves, and acting out as werewolves actually attacked people, killed them with their bare hands, savaged them, tore their bodies apart, ate them sometimes. There was a guy named Peter Strub in Germany who was on trial for that, and he was eventually, convicted of witchcraft and lycanthropy, the idea of turning into a werewolf. But that wasn't unusual. Well, I shouldn't say it wasn't unusual, but it happened more than once throughout Europe, especially in the 1600s. And these people were convinced that they had turned into werewolves. Now, again, going back to what I said about external and internal, they didn't grow hair, they didn't get fangs, they didn't develop claws, but they killed people and they acted out on all fours and ate people like wolves do. So, to all practical purposes, they were werewolves. They were wolves. And in those days, all the records show these people that were eventually brought to justice were executed because they were considered, just crazy and evil. It wasn't until about the 18th century, and late 18th century maybe, where we started thinking maybe these people are just not right, and so started locking them up instead of executing them. But there's been examples, even, oh my gosh, I mean, there was a report from the New York Times of, I'm trying to think of the year, I think it was like 1996, which is, pretty
modern.
Recent. Yeah, right. And it comes from Uttar Pradesh in India. And it talked about Again, this is New York Times article. New York Times is, not one of these sketchy fly-by-night newspapers. It's pretty respected journalism. They talked about over the period of maybe 4 or 5 months or so, where 33 children from this province, from this state in India, disappeared, one at a time. And when they found them, the ones they did find, the bodies were totally savaged, as if by animals. Now, India's got a lot of jungles, it's got a lot of animals, so that could have been. But there were eyewitnesses to what they were saying was a werewolf. They interviewed a girl, I think she was about 10 years old, this New York Times interviewing her. And she said that she saw her little brother, grabbed by this, she called it a man wolf.
I remember. Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
She grabbed it, and she said it threw her brother over its shoulder and ran off on 2 legs, and the brother was never seen again. And her uncle in the article said, the government wants us to say that it was a wolf. He said, but it wasn't a wolf. It was a man. He said the same thing. He called it a man wolf instead of wolf man. But so people saw this. People had eyewitness accounts to this. What was that? We still don't know. I mean, at one point, the killings just stopped, and we don't know why they started. We don't know why they stopped. And whatever this thing
was. If you go, and I remember when that story broke, and I was just thinking to myself, kids aren't contaminated, right? There's a certain amount of honesty there, right? But I don't think she was lying. I think that she saw what she saw. And then you turn around, and I could ask you about the dog man, right? That's like this trending thing today. Mm-hmm. But we can go back to Anubis or any of the Egyptian demigods and their portrayal. Now, Anubis is evil looking. Anubis scares the crap out of me. I'm a big Egyptian guy. I love the country and things, but Anubis is terrifying to look at. But Anubis is like the coolest of the gods, right? It's like the coolest gig, and the judgment of character before you enter into the next realm of the afterlife, right? All wise and all knowing, but pretty scary looking. Mm-hmm. And so that depiction of Anubis and what and Anubis is, I've got statues of Anubis here in the studio. That's what that girl was describing in India. And we have this modern thing, right? In pop culture, the dog man. Are we just talking about the same thing? And that is part of reality.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about those connections. I do talk about some of the Egyptian gods in the book, especially in the dog man, but I hadn't brought it together with the Indian thing. But it's something to consider. This is something that I've noticed too, is that a lot of these forms and types, there is similarity among cultures, that some characteristics, some types pop up in cultures where you wouldn't necessarily expect it. Like, well, there's one in this thing in India, and then there's thing in Mexico. Well, and so you wonder, is it just do we have a certain mindset that we all can sort of envision some creatures that would be terrifying or whatever, and so we create them, and just by coincidence, somebody in
they're
India,
all werewolves. Yeah, they're all werewolves. Right. It's in our DNA. It's a certain genome in the DNA where that's what pops into our head. I think it's beyond coincidence, right? To have cultures over millennia and transoceanic connections, right? That wouldn't have any connection at all in history, but yet are talking and depicting the same things. And we're going to pick this up after the break. There's another part to this where it seems you go to what was that called? American Werewolf in London, as a classic example.
Mhm.
Not knowing that you're turning into a werewolf, right? You wake up naked, right? You're like, what happened last night? Man, did I drink too much? And there's that where it's almost out of your control, right? The full moon, whatever it is, but it certainly looks like it's not something that you are initiating, that it is an involuntary reflex of some kind that is bringing on these changes. And is that something that happens across cultures?
Well, I think it does. And again, the question is, why and how does that happen? Because, you talk about cultures that are separated by an ocean, 8,000, 9,000 miles, whatever it is of ocean, and they have no way of getting there, or there's no cell phones, So how does that happen? Are they just picking up images and ideas from their environment that maybe the environments are somewhat similar, same animals or something? I don't know. Or are these just sort of archetypal figures that are actually out there that we're just discovering?
Yeah, when you look at the involuntary, I call it a reflex, right? This involuntary thing. Do you remember the video of one of Obama's Secret Service agents shapeshifting? Have you seen that video?
I don't think so. I've seen.
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. We're going to take a break right here. While we're taking the break, you Google Obama shape-shifting Secret Service agent, something like that. It'll pop up. And it's Obama. He's like speaking at it's a dinner or something, and he's on stage. The camera pans around the audience, right? That's all it is. And one of his Secret Service agents standing right there with the backs to everybody in the room are facing him. Nobody's looking at him. He just whoop. And this is watch the video.
Check that out.
Watch the video, and you have to ask yourself when you see the video, is this some kind of digital artifact that's happening with the way the camera and the pickup, and the sensor is trying to grab onto something, and this is something funky, right? Or is this real? It's not CG, right? But if that's the case, nothing else pixelates, nothing else goes crazy. But his face, 100% reptilian. And it's just for a second. It's like the wait, Jimmy, don't play the video until I'm back with my coffee. Hold on for a second. I'm going to do this in real time. Bill, John, post the link. Oh, I think they just did. Okay, here it is. Yeah. Okay, John just did it. News. Obama's alien bodyguard. Yeah, this is crazy. Let me see if I can. How do I save that link, Bill? I can't do that in the chat. See, I can do this, but I can't highlight the link. Okay. Well, there it is right there. John, you know what to look for. Yep. It's Obama's alien bodyguard. I'm telling you, it is one of the craziest videos. We're going to take our break right here. Our guest tonight, John Kachuba. We are talking about shapeshifters. More with John when we come back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. JimmyChurchRadio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black Blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture, send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with a Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to JimmyChurchRadio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, John Kachuba. We're talking Shapeshifters tonight. And John, I have the video of Obama's bodyguard. And so I'm going to pop this up, and you can watch it. In now, I haven't watched the whole video or anything like that, but let's see what we've got here. And let's see. Here we go. I've got it muted. Oh, hold on. So a lot of analysis. Now watch as he oh man. Right here. Here it goes. You ready? Watch this. Watch. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's definitely pretty wild. And that's been out there for a minute now. But he looks normal, and then suddenly, right, he gets this oh wait. Okay, hold on. Did that just go out on the air? Some commercial? Okay, hopefully that didn't. You didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear anything.
Okay, good. That didn't go out live. Okay. That so the voluntary, involuntary side of this is what we were discussing before the break. And is that part of shape-shifting lore? Is that this is an involuntary action that you don't have any control over it?
Right. So it's interesting that you bring that up, though, because I do in my book talk about use those terms, voluntary, involuntary, as well as internal, external. But no, it depends. Traditionally, like when we talk about werewolves, there's always this thing about the full moon transforming werewolves, right? That full moon thing was never part of werewolf lore until the movie with the Wolfman, the
Lon Chaney, yeah.
Where he has that poem about I can't remember, but when the wolf bane blooms, the full moon, that's when it happens. But that was never part of werewolf lore. That's where it starts with this full moon thing. Previous to that, werewolves had there was two things. Some of them were cursed. If you go back to like Middle Ages, there's some French ballads and things like that, and French legends that have a guy, I forgot what his name is, totally escapes me right now, but he's a knight. He's a French knight, and he is cursed, and he becomes a wolf. But it's certainly not by his own, he doesn't want that. He's cursed. But afterwards, when you start looking at werewolves, there are stories in different cultures where it's an ability that you have, and you just have it. There's a novelist out that you may know, and I'll drop his name because he's a great writer, Stephen Graham Jones, who is a Native American. He writes a lot about werewolves and all. He's a Bram Stoker Award winner. He's a great guy. He's got he has a book out. What's it called? I can't remember. He's going to kill me. But anyway, in the story, changing to a werewolf is a genetic thing. So it's in your blood. So it's passed down to your family. And you have that ability to transform at will. And it's something you develop. according to his story. Like when you're a teenager, you start getting your werewolf vibes, and you start realizing how to do it, and you do it. And there are cultures that have said that all along. When you look at things like, let's see. Yeah, I guess that would still be a werewolf. So anyway, there's cultures where it is voluntary, and it's for other types of shapeshifters as well. The old legends, a lot of times it was a curse. When you go back again to classical Greek and Roman, Egyptian mythology, the gods would come down and they would curse you by transforming you into an animal or something, because you somehow transgressed, them, whatever they wanted. But that kind of goes by the wayside when we start thinking about shamans and witches and saying they have power, and they have power to become shapeshifters on their own, voluntary. So it's a mixed bag. It's both.
And now we have Dracula, and we have the Bram Stoker. I've done so many shows on this. I'm so fascinated with it. We have the Bram Stoker. Even his life is pretty remarkable. Bram's life himself, but we have the creation of Dracula. But if we go back to Vlad, the Impaler, now we're mixing again reality with fantasy and an author's work of fiction, or was it? And Vlad the Impaler was certainly real, and a very, what's the word I want to use? A very gnarly guy, right? A very, very nasty person. And he wasn't the only one that was drinking blood back then either.
Right.
But what about Vlad? Is that fact or fiction?
Yeah. So part of my research for the book, I was in Romania, and I went to all the sites that are attributed to Dracula, and I'm talking about Dracula. The Bran Castle, that was supposedly the model for the castle that Stoker used in the novel. The birthplace of, so the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes Dracul. I went to where he was born. I went to one of his old palaces that's kind of just ruins now. There's a tower left. But I also went to his grave site. And this is interesting because the grave site for Vlad is it's in a place called Snagov, and it's a little tiny island, really maybe 3 or 4 acres. It's a very small island in the middle of a lake, and there's a causeway that you can walk out to it. And on that island is this Orthodox chapel, really small, really very tiny chapel, and his grave is in there. So there's a slab, and that's supposed to be the burial site of Vlad. Well, in 1930 something, some archaeologists, for whatever reason, opened up the grave, and there wasn't anything in there. So I think, how appropriate is that for somebody who's supposed to be a vampire? Where is he if he's not in his grave, right? But the true story, yeah. I mean, so Vlad Tepes was, a prince of Wallachia in the 16th century, I guess it would be, and was pretty ruthless in how he dealt with his opposition. But he was also considered a hero by a lot of the people in what is today Romania, because he fought off the Ottomans, he fought off the Huns, he fought off basically anybody that tried to invade his territory. So, and he did it, quite violently. I think a lot of your audience probably knows about his impaling people, enemies of the state, political prisoners, prisoners of war, sometimes by the thousands along a roadside. It's kind of a warning to other people. But I have to say, that's pretty gruesome. That's a gruesome way to go. But he probably wasn't a whole lot different than a lot of princes and kings of that era, who, like you said, are pretty bloodthirsty. He wasn't the only guy doing that kind of stuff. But the stories grew up about him, about possibly being a vampire. I don't actually know how that started, but it did. And I'm not sure how much of that can be attributed to Bram Stoker when he writes Dracula, because when he writes Dracula, he's using Vlad as sort of the model. Count Dracula even says that he's like descendant from Vlad. So he even says that in the novel. And he repeats a little bit of history there, which is true. And then, of course, the places that Stoker used as Count Dracula's locations and all really existed and had connections to Vlad. So there's that. And it's hard to say who started the whole thing. You know, did Stoker make Vlad a vampire? Or did Vlad have some practices that people thought he was a vampire that then Stoker used in his Count Dracula?
That's what made Stoker. That's what made Dracula the original story as he did it so scary, because it was like a mockumentary, right? Where he took all of these facts, charts and dates and locations and names and travel, where if somebody was going to go back and fact check this, they would see that, well, wait a minute, is Dracula real or not? Because all of this other stuff is checking out. And that was a pretty inventive, creative way to tell the story, was to mix a documentary into this fictional fantasy tale. I want to call it almost science fiction, right? There's so many elements, but that's what made it so terrifying. Was he wrote it as like it was an article on the front page of the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he was in fertile ground there too. I mean, he never went to Romania. You know, he actually never visited those sites himself.
That's right.
But,
That's right.
You know, he stayed in England. He talked to people who were from that area, and he looked at drawings and sketches of different locations. He read a lot of information. He talks about in Dracula, in the novel, he talks about Whitby in England, where I guess that's where Lucy first meets the Count.
That's where the boat crashes. The boat crashes on shore.
Right.
Yeah.
And Whitby, of course,
which really happened.
Right, exactly.
Right? Yeah, the boat crash really happened.
And when he describes Whitby, describes the ruins of the Abbey and everything else, and that's all there. You can go to Whitby today, and there it is. You can see it just as he saw it. But the interesting thing that, like I said, he has a rich lore to go on here, because in Europe anyway, the vampire story sort of begins in Eastern Europe, in Romania, what is today Romania, Hungary, those areas, because they already had a pretty rich folklore about people coming back from the dead, not being fully dead, rising from the dead, and then feeding off the living. So this was there already, but those kinds of vampires in the folk tradition are much different than Nosferatu or Count Dracula, or Bela Lugosi's depiction, or Christopher Lee, or any of these people. Vampires in the folk tradition were actually pretty hale and hearty looking when they came out of the grave. They were kind of actually ruddy complexion and all. Because why not? They're feeding off the living. They're not emaciated. They're okay. And it wasn't so much even blood as much as they were. It's sort of undefined. Blood maybe, but it was more like drawing from their spiritual essence, like drawing from their psyche. So when you consider tuberculosis, before we understood what tuberculosis was, people simply called it, the wasting away disease, because you over a period of time, you became emaciated, weak, all that, right? And the common folklore to that was that you were being preyed upon by a vampire. And even if it was no sign of taking blood, but they were drawing your life essence from you, So that's where that comes from. There was, in New England, there was an amazing thing, even up until, I guess it was like toward the latter part of the 19th century, 1880s, 1890s. Mercy Brown in Exeter, Rhode Island, was a woman who, her mother passed away from some wasting away disease. Her sister passed away from the wasting away disease. Her brother became very ill and so went west, I think to Arizona. His doctor said, go out there, get the air, get the clean air. It'll do you, it'll do you wonders, right? So he was out there. While he's out there, Mercy Brown, 19 years old now at Exeter, dies from this wasting away disease. So now her sister's dead, her mother's dead, she's dead. The brother comes back to Rhode Island, and he's not doing any better. Now he's getting worse again. So, and this is all a true story, and the stories come from the Providence Journal, which is the newspaper up in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's, like I say, it's current, like late 1890s or so. The common assumption is that Mercy Brown, for whatever reason they picked on her, because she was the last survivor, I guess, was a vampire. And that she was responsible for killing her mother, her sister, and now her brother who's dying. So they dig up her grave. And there's reporters from the newspaper, the Providence Journal. They dig up her grave. They cut out her heart. They burn it to ashes. They mix it in a potion, and they give it to the brother to drink. He drinks it, and he dies. Not immediately, but he dies anyway. But this was, look at the time period. This was tuberculosis. And the funny thing is, at this point, Jimmy, is that we knew what tuberculosis was. And in New England, they knew what it was. They knew that it was a disease. And yet there was still this folk tradition that, no, this is, it can't just be disease. It's got to be brought on by a vampire. So even up until almost the turn of the 20th century, we're still believing this, and that was
it hasn't changed in Romania, my man. You know that, you were there.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Romania, that whole area. You can start in Poland, right, and just head south, right? Go south. That whole area, vampires and that part of reality and is life. That's real. What was it like to go there, not only to research this, but to see people's attitudes and belief systems about vampires?
Yeah. Well, I encountered basically two things, especially talking about Vlad. I'll back up about vampires. We're talking about Vlad specifically, Vlad Tepes Dracul. It was really mixed because there were people that considered him a national hero. And there are monuments to him and everything else in Romania because, again, of his defending the homeland from invaders. But there were also people in Romania who were upset because Vlad defended the homeland, but he had a very specific idea of who should be in the homeland. And so people who were living there too, like people, for instance, who claim Hungarian ethnicity, they have a hard time in Romania because there's this Hungarian-Romania kind of controversy. At one time, part of Romania was part of Hungary and vice versa. So they're not so hot on him because he killed a lot of their people. So, that's a mix right there. But in terms of vampires, there are people that say, come on, this is, 2024. Come on, there's no vampires. We're sophisticated people. We don't believe it. There's other ones who would say, I'm not going to talk to you about vampires. Say, why not? I'm not going to talk to you about vampires because I'm not going to talk to you about vampires. Okay. I got it. So yeah, you're right. That attitude is out there. It's weird. I did not find that anywhere else. I was besides Romania, I was in Belarus. I was in Ukraine. And that was in some countries in Europe, France, Portugal, Italy, I don't know, a bunch, Germany. But it was only in Eastern Europe where I got that about vampires, where a lot of people just say, nope, you can do it.
You don't want to go into some village pub in the middle of the night, and go in and strike up a conversation about vampires.
No, you don't.
You just don't want to do it. And then I'm very fascinated with the reports that come in. We probably get about one a month some archaeological sites, some dig, and they unearth the body of somebody that was chained and handcuffed, iron bars right over the crypt, and to make sure that, because they were a vampire and that they were going to stay in the ground.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that belief is still there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, it might still be happening now, some rural village or something where somebody dies and maybe they're still taking those same precautions. I don't know.
Well, when you see that, this is what's fascinating. You would expect that in Romania or Hungary or whatever. All right. I get that. I do. But in England, right, in the Middle Ages, to handcuff somebody and grade up the coffin so the dead wouldn't rise, that's a very, very, very deep tradition. And without the internet, right, without movies, that this is going on across cultures like that, and languages and the barriers.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I don't know if it's just, the universal fear of death and not understanding what happens after and whether people come back or not, or whether it's more specific to that area and that region and saying, well, we've had some experiences in the past that make us think that, yeah, Uncle Bob might be coming back. He might be a little ticked off, So,
can we talk about aliens for a second? I know we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but in changing gears, E.T., I would think, all right, John, just go with me on this, that an advanced culture that could get to Earth, right, knows more than we do. I think that's a pretty safe bet, right? Pretty smart.
I would agree.
Okay. All right. So if that's our foundation, then they would have the ability to not freak us out. In other words, shapeshift into something that wouldn't give us fear, right? Shapeshift into Jesus. I don't know, Elvis, David Bowie, whatever it is, right? To shapeshift into something that wouldn't freak us out. And to talk about shape-shifting reptilians, but if an advanced race is coming to this planet, I would think that they would have that ability, right? Is that a safe thing to assume?
Well, yeah, I think it is, because actually, did you read my book, Jimmy? It sounds like you're at every page.
I have.
So there's a guy that I quote, and I cannot remember his name. I can remember all the people I talked to, but it's in the book. And he basically does a lot of work with alien research. That's his thing. And he says exactly that in order for aliens to be able to come to us and understand us and learn about us or whatever, they can't possibly come in their normal guise, because it would terrify us. Even if they came as Pokemon. I mean, if we had 1 million Pokemon running around, really, I mean, that would still creep us out, right? So he said the only way they can possibly do it is by putting on an appearance that we would recognize, they'd be comfortable with. In other words, a human appearance. So that kind of goes back to the reptilian alien shapeshifter thing. If they have the human appearance, that doesn't bother us. We don't know. So to his point, we may be interacting with aliens on a daily basis and not even know it, which is interesting. I mean, I would think the same thing. I think of the Star Wars movies with all these fantastic characters from all these different galaxies and planets. I mean, honest to God, I really wouldn't want to be in a room with all those. I mean, I wouldn't know where to look. I wouldn't know. I mean, seriously, right? We'd be freaked out entirely. We would just lose it. So I do think there's something to that.
Well, what's the alternative? The alternative would be what? They send us an email from interstellar space with some JPEGs. Right? This is what we look like, and this is what you can expect. So when we step off the ship, you don't freak out.
And they they put it on Tinder too.
Yeah, so. right. Tinder. Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow. Swipe left.
Yeah.
So but that's the alternative, right? Because the other way, I mean, I would assume that they would know our languages. They would know how to speak. They would know our turn-ons and turn-offs and our fears and our joys, right? They would know all of these things because they've been observing us forever. And on their way here, they got all the time for study hall, don't they?
Yeah.
So by the time they get here, having shapeshifted and speaking in a language and not saying things that freak us out, I think would be something that we should expect and not be surprised about, that they would know a lot about us.
Right. And then the question is, so at what point do they, like you say, reveal their true nature, or do they not even do it, just saying, look, trust us, you don't want to see what we look like, you know?
What's that movie? I want to say it's Dan Aykroyd, and he's in the truck. He's the truck driver. Large Marge. You want to see something really scary? Yeah, you remember that? And he pulled his face off. Yeah. What was that? Was that like Twilight Zone, the movie? Oh, man, I'm showing my age that I can't remember. But yeah, I think it was Large Marge. But yeah, that's exactly it. Do you really want to see it? It's in Galaxy Quest too, as well. The limousine scene when she forgets her shape-shifting disguise is malfunctioning, and he sees her for a second as an octopus or whatever it was. And then you see the real. So yeah, I would think that would be, and again, the scariest part of all is that you don't really know.
Right.
You would know.
Right. I mean, I think that's the only way that, well, let's put it this way. I think it's the only way that an alien civilization could come to us that really wants to know about us and interact with us. Otherwise, just kill us with their death ray. I mean, they don't have to do anything. So yeah, which is actually kind of a comforting thought, if you will, that if there's aliens out there like that, they're obviously trying to make an impression to know about us and hopefully, interact with us in a good way.
Now, why is it so romanticized? Why do we want to be shapeshifters? There's this, and I'm not talking about love when I say romanticize. That I think that inside we all kind of have that fantasy, being able to shapeshift, and we're okay with it. We're okay with werewolves, but the world loves vampires. They do. Right. Why is that?
Right. So I talk about that, and I have a couple of sort of ideas on that. One is that I think all of us, if we're honest, we recognize that we have that we lack certain abilities or certain talents or certain skills, or that we're inferior in some ways, to other people. Maybe, I'm not as strong as Arnold Schwarzenegger was, never have been. I played soccer. I can't run fast as a marathoner, So we all have this. We all recognize that there's something within us. So we say, boy, if only I could do this, or if only I look this way, if only I had this ability, So there's kind of some wish fulfillment in that a shapeshifter allows you to sort of step into that role, right? You can visualize yourself doing something else or being something other than what you are. We have a phrase about putting on a different hat, right? Like right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm wearing my book promoter, idea promoter hat. I am.
Mask. Mask.
Yeah, well, mask.
Yes.
Okay, mask is better, right? I mean, this is not. I'm not like this every day. My wife would throw me out of the house if I was, So there's that. But then there's also the other part about too that when you think about what a shapeshifter can do, if you are able to throw off all the bonds that sort of hold you in check, your moral code, maybe your religious code, the law of your land where you're living. If you can get rid of all that kind of stuff and just, run naked through the forest howling at the moon, would you like to do that? So the shapeshifter allows you that kind of ability to say, I'm going to be a bad guy. And this is getting a little on the black side, but I don't even necessarily mean to be that way. If you look at
no, not really. That's I think that we naturally assume and take that position. I don't think that you're going anywhere where no, we're already there.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. I mean, mankind, humankind is already there with that. And that is the way that all of this is perceived.
I mean, we even talk about having an animal nature, right? We know humans have an animal nature, and it's only our civilization and that civilizing attitude that keeps that animal nature in check. Think of the Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? So you have this doctor, Dr. Jekyll, a fine Christian, upstanding doctor. He helps people. He cures people. He keeps people alive. And yet he's working on this potion to make himself something else. And what he turns himself into, of course, is this horrible Mr. Hyde who actually murders a guy. And then he finds he can't live with that anymore and he kills himself. But why, here's a guy is saying, boy, I'm this great guy, but man, I would love to just go out and kill somebody or whatever it was. And he does. And so I think the shapeshifter character, as a character, whether we're seeing it in the movie, whether reading about it in my book or other books, whether we're acting out as Halloween, putting on a costume, or going to a masquerade ball, any of those kinds of things, cosplay, any of this stuff is a safety outlet. It's like a safety valve that allows us to step out of our everyday role and in our business suit or whatever, and get into this other kind of weird state. But we're not harming anybody. We're not harming ourselves. We're not harming anybody else. And at the end of the day, we go back to our business suit. So I think that's what the shapeshifter does. It's that kind of a character. It's like a wish fulfillment thing. It's out there like, man, what if I can just do this, just for 5 minutes.
It's so funny how society, and I'm included in this. Okay, so you've got Anne Rice, whatever, Brad Pitt, right? Interview with the Vampire, where you've got this romantic life, going through all of the ages and all of the wisdom, and you develop this empathy, right, for Dracula, and then for the vampire lifestyle, you develop this empathy, and we quickly forget how and what they do, right? It's like, wait a minute here. You remember the little vampire baby dude? You remember him?
Yeah.
Right. Dude, that's just a horrible thing to do to a child. But anyway. And then when a vampire gets taken out, right, the wooden stake, right, that we're mad. Can't kill the vampire, right? What do you do? It's bizarre. Right. How we look, we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to cheer that on, but yet we do. It's a fascinating, thought experiment on society when you look at it that way.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that's exactly what I'm saying, is that we can put ourselves in that place of that character, and totally bond with it, have total affinity with it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess. Live forever, have all the sex you want, read all the books you want, learn wealth, and all this, and have. And that was the other thing. Okay, there's another part to this. The vampire women. Right? That was the other part. It was just like this is a weird twist, and we were okay with it. Right? The vampire harem. It's like, wait a minute here. This is like a really twisted look on society, but it's vampires are okay. It's really weird.
Right. And there's so many different shapeshifter. We talk about vampires specifically, and I don't know why we resonate so much with that. Maybe because out of all the shapeshifters, it's the one that is sort of most human in a way, but also maybe most admirable. Like you say, wealthy, sexy, live forever, do what you want. Who wouldn't want that, right? We don't necessarily say, I want to be a werewolf. We don't. I mean, that's kind of, we don't think that way. But there's so much on television. I have a bunch of grandkids, and I mean, they're watching, there's some show called Morphle. And it's a cartoon show. It's a half-hour cartoon show. And there's this little red thing. It looks like a gumdrop with eyes, right? And it's some kind of a pet that you get out of the magic pet store. But Morphle, throughout the whole thing, the little girl that owns him will say, Morphle, turn into a truck. Boom. Morphle turns into a truck. Okay. Morphle, turn into a ham sandwich. Morphle turns into a ham sandwich. I mean, there's all this, shapeshifters. My other little granddaughter said, well, do you know about Vampirella? I said, Vampirella? What is that? Vampirella is a little vampire girl who used to live in Transylvania, now lives in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
And she's cute. And she had ghost friends and a skeleton friend. And,
got fangs. She's got fangs. Yeah.
Right, and mommy and daddy, and they had sleepovers. I mean, okay. So we're even normalizing, shapeshifters in a way here too, at an early age with kids.
Somebody, hang on for a second. Let me back this up. Yeah. Would you, if you made a deal, right? What was Dracula's assistant's name? What was his name?
Dracula's assistant.
Yeah. What's his name? The guy that took care of the castle.
Oh man. I'm on a blank on that.
Okay, I'm going to pop that up in the chat. What was everybody? What was Dracula's assistant's name? I can't think of his name in a second. Not Igor.
No.
Reinfeld. Yeah, Reinfeld.
Right.
Reinfeld. Okay, so you make a deal with Dracula. You make a deal with a vampire that you can hang out, right? We can be friends, but no biting of the neck. Would you do it?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, isn't it?
I don't know.
There's a really good movie with Scarlett Johansson that it's called Under the Skin. It's exactly what we're talking about here. Shape-shifting aliens. Okay? So he's here. She's E.T. and she's of the bad kind, but she shapeshifts into Scarlett Johansson, right? She's beautiful. And she eats men. She goes out and entices them, with her charm. You need a ride, you need a lift. What are you doing? Whatever. And the next thing you know, and in the end of the movie, well, it's 20 years old now, so I'm not really giving anything away. She reveals herself. And so this entire, that's why it's called Under the Skin. And once again, you have in the end, the movie, John, the story is despicable. It's gnarly, right? And in the end, she gets hunted down and taken out, and you feel horrible for her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
I'll
It's
have to blow it up.
yeah. Under the Skin is really, really, really good. It's really well done, but it all goes back to that same thing, this mythology of shape shifting and being fooled and not knowing what is real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a guy up in the Cleveland area in Ohio named Guy Savelli. And there was a book that came out and became a movie called The Men That Look at Ghosts or Stare at Ghosts. Goats, not ghosts. Men that look at, okay. It was a secret operation that the U.S. Army was doing, basically mind control. And Guy Savelli is this martial arts master, but he also does a lot with mind control stuff. I don't know how he does it, but he was training some of these soldiers. He's worked with Navy SEAL teams and Rangers and all this kind of stuff. And they had him in a room, and there was a goat out in the yard, which he couldn't see. There was no window or anything else like that. And supposedly, just by concentrating and focusing, he knocked the goat down. The goat went doom, right down and was like out cold. And it was like, 20 yards away. He's a guy that you talk about, not knowing who you're dealing with, or the scary part of not understanding the person you're interacting with. One of his students told me that he and Guy were in a bar, and they were just having a drink, and some drunken guy comes over to him and for whatever reason gets in Guy's face and starts saying, "I'm going to knock your block off." Typical, loudmouth drunk that's got nothing better to do to pick a fight with somebody who doesn't even know. So Guy just stands up and he looks at this drunken guy, and the student is there going, "Oh boy, this is not going to be good." And he's watching him. He said, all of a sudden, he said, "I saw a guy's face." And he said, "I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't a human face anymore." He said it was like a tiger. He said it was like eyes. He said, I saw a tiger face. And the drunk goes he's like, whoa, hey, okay. And he backs off, right? And he leaves. I mean, he was like terrified. And then the student said, and just like that was gone. And he said, I said to the guy, "What happened?" The guy just kind of said, "I just showed him my true self." What did that mean? So here's the question. Did the student see Guy shapeshift? Did Guy do some kind of a mind control thing where the drunk thought he was seeing this tiger face and the student thought he was seeing this tiger face, and it really wasn't a tiger face? So it's just an example again of what we're talking about here, like not knowing reality versus what you think is reality, maybe to what may be the real reality under the
right. You're a historian. Is this something that the ancients had a grasp of, and then somewhere along the line in the last 2,000-3,000 years, we lost that ability, right? And if we're going to achieve the next stage of evolution, then we have to go back and focus on consciousness and the mind and the dimensions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And get back to that, because it seems that before distractions, right, lots of things happen, but before distractions, that the ancients knew about all of this and understood it and could control it. We just lost that ability, but we all have it. Wouldn't that be our next stage of evolution, to start to understand what we can't touch? Yeah.
I would hope. And I agree with you. I mean, I think of, we talked about cavemen, prehistoric times, before any devices at all, right? I mean, you're running around with a spear and a piece of rock on a stick, that's your thing. How is it that even in a group of 10 or 15 or 20 hunters, how is it that they were able to know when the herds of mastodon were migrating from one location to another? How did they know where they were going to be? How did they know how to get them, how to locate them? I mean, yeah, there's maybe signs from nature where you follow tracks and stuff, sure, but that doesn't solve every occasion. I mean, there was so much that I think we've lost. We still don't know when they map out the brain. We still don't know, like, I don't know, maybe 50% of what the brain does. It's there. It's got to be doing something. And I like to think that it's storing ancient wisdom that we have lost because, as you said, Jimmy, we're now using our computers, the internet, our cell phones, even going back to, earlier, books, whatever. We're relying on other things to get our knowledge. Or to get, rather than what we may have innate, what we have inside us that we can develop if we know how. And certainly there are people that do that, right? I mean, there's a lot of people with great mind control and can meditate and can do things because they know how to do it. They know how to access themselves. I meditate every day. I've got a meditation practice, and I'm not saying that, okay, now I got this ancient wisdom, but I do think that there are things in there, in all of us, as you say, that some of us can access them kind of naturally, other people with little practice, and some of us will never get there. But it'd be nice to think we try, because I do think there's a lot stored up in that gray matter that would be really helpful to access.
Isn't that the fascinating part? Why did nature give us a brain that we can't use, or don't use, I should say? Right. We use, some say 5%, some say 10%. It's one of the biggest mysteries. It's one of the greatest creations in the entire universe, the human brain.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing that we know the least amount about. It's just fascinating. Right. And so why have it if we don't use it, which would suggest that we did use it at one time.
Right. Just like the appendix seems to be useless, right? But now doctors are thinking that at one time, meaning millions of years ago, it may have served some purpose. And now it's a vestigial organ that, it's there, but we don't need it anymore. We don't use it anymore. So, yeah, and it's hard to believe that nature would waste the space and the material to give us all these brains and not use them. It's like, yeah.
Do you think? And we'll leave on this. You brought up plants and medicines and different things that allowed ancient cultures to go into another dimension or parallel world and see things that, to me, are just as real as this reality that we call a base reality. Mm-hmm. It's just access to ayahuasca and things like that are showing you another dimension that truly exists. We just don't see it.
Right.
And that may be that other 90% of the brain is able to access and go into these other dimensions and see them. And they're just as real as the world that we are in. And shouldn't science that is trying to find these 11 dimensions and these parallel worlds and these, the multiverse, shouldn't science apply that and look at consciousness and maybe find these other dimensions that way?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it sounds like you're going to have a guest this week that I think is going to get into some of this stuff. But I read, I've been reading like quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and I don't understand like 90% of what I read. But what I do get is that, this isn't the only reality, and how you access the other ones, whether you can do it, as you say, through hallucinogenics or whether, meditation, like the spiritualists do or whatever. I mean, it's clear it's a multiverse and that there's, a lot out there that we haven't accessed yet and hopefully will.
It's a fascinating time for us to be here, because not only if we look at the last 300-400 years where we've had like real science, Right. Okay. All right. And it's been about 100 years. If you just like antibiotics, it's like the start of real science for me and moving forward. But if we look at it that way, it's that also that 300 years or 400 years where we started to lose touch with spirituality and the other part of it, because science started to take over and people wanted facts and numbers. And I appreciate physics, but consciousness is a real thing, and it exists outside of the body. That's it. It's a non-physical thing, but science doesn't want to touch it. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And there have been some neuroscientists lately that you just mentioned consciousness being outside the body. And there are actually some MDs and PhDs now that are thinking, you know what? Maybe so. I mean, the Buddhists talk about the idea of like a cosmic mind, like everything is connected, right? Outside of us, not in here, outside of us.
Right. Yeah, I was last night. My guest Constance Briggs. I was talking about this last night, where everybody wants this gift from ET, right? Technology and this and that. And I said, I'm not so sure that that's how it would go down. And where the physicist of the world on Monday, I'm going to have a physicist from CERN on the show, live from Switzerland. Okay, he's going to get the hard questions, and he knows they're coming at him. But the trip with all of that is that physics is pushing and pushing and pushing, and they want the theory of everything. Right. And the one equation that answers everything. And I think that ET would like show up and go, math. Yeah, we did that, but it was a long time ago. Right? No. It's all about consciousness. That's where it's at. And I bet that's where communication is. That's where everything. That's how we run our lives. And I think that'll be the gift from ET. It's not going to be some technical jump in engineering or something. I don't think that's what the gift would be.
Well, I would hope that would be the gift that you're talking about. That would be great if we can get to that level.
Yeah, and those physicists, right? Those non-spiritual atheists, right? Chemistry dudes, right? Everything is one to zero. I knew it all along. That's what it'll be, right? I knew it was consciousness. I just couldn't say anything. Yeah. Where can everybody reach out to you, John?
So my website is johnkachuba.com. Pretty easy. You can check me out there. My appearances are on there. My books are available through there. My books are also, you can get them on Amazon, online dealers, hopefully at your local bookstore. So I'm around. I give a lot of talks, so. Great
conversation tonight, man. It was just a perfect show. Thank you so much. And John's right. It's johnkachuba.com. The links are below, over on our website, and throughout social media. John, thank you so much. Be safe out there, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Jimmy. Take care. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, John. Perfect show. And with that, I am going to wrap. Again, John's links are below, over on our website and throughout social media. Thank you so much, John. And tomorrow night on the show, Dr. Simeon Hein is with us. And tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about, that's right, the multiverse, physics, science, dimensions, all of that stuff and much more tomorrow night with Dr. Simeon Hein. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dex. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Dr. Simeon Hein, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.